Hello YouTube, I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney on this channel. We answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users, getting folks the answer they need from an employment attorney. We have a question here from YouTube user Octuple Threat. Excuse me. Octuple Threat says, "Hey Vince, I asked a question a couple of days ago, but it was a bit of a mess. I think I've got my main confusion ironed out a bit. Are cases involving sleep disorders and or flexible scheduling particularly difficult? It seems that once I explain the situation to a lawyer, they lose all interest in what I'm saying, and I can't help but to think it comes back to the flexible scheduling or greater allowances for tardiness. I've had a lawyer say they didn't think the case had merit because my employer gave me what I asked for. In reference to an agreement I was asked to sign while at risk of being fired as soon as the next day. Does this argument have weight, or would the employer still be required to accommodate until they can prove it would be unreasonable to do so? I guess to summarize, at what point of effort is an employer freed from their obligation to accommodate a qualified worker?" So you did kind of have it in there yourself, right? You mentioned the reasonability standard. And there's a couple things going on. So first and foremost, when you're asking for an accommodation with flexible scheduling, that can be difficult for many employers. And many employers are going to have solid claims as to why something like that is not reasonable. Like, there's a lot of jobs where flexible scheduling is just not going to work. I'll give you an example. School bus driver. Flexible scheduling doesn't work. You're going to leave the kids on the side of the road. They're not going to get to school. It's not viable. I'm sure that's not what you do for a living. I'm just giving an example. But there's a lot of jobs where flexible scheduling would be inherently unreasonable. And that's the first obstacle you're facing, I think, when you're talking to employment attorneys and you're talking about flexible scheduling. Now, I think I recently talked about this a little bit as a hypothetical. I don't think I was referring to you. But something we'll see a lot is people coming in with like an insomnia condition or some kind of sleep disorder, right? And sometimes they'll be like, I just need to be late sometimes. I just need to be half hour late. And the disability is like major insomnia. I don't know the actual diagnosis, but like major insomnia disorder. And you're like, okay, so what does major insomnia disorder look like? Not a real condition. That's just a name I made up. And they would be like, well, sometimes I, can go like 4 or 5 days sleeping like 2 hours a night. Difficulty there. If you're asking for flexible scheduling, like I need to come in 2 hours late sometimes. What does that have to do? How is that going to help? If you're sleeping 2 hours a night for 4 or 5 days in a row, how is coming in 2 hours late going to help you? And it might. I'm not saying it won't, but I'm saying that I don't understand how it helps you. You're going to have to educate me, right? And I will sit and listen to you because I don't know anything about what you're suffering from. I don't know about your disability, and you can tell me things. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to be a little bit skeptical because there's a lot of people who really want to be late for work. It's very common that people want that. And so you get a lot of people coming in the door with sleep disorder or migraine issues where they want to be able to show up late to work. And the thing you say to the migraine ones is, why is your migraine always before work? Why have you never suffered a migraine during work? Why don't you ever have to leave work with a migraine? Why is it always the migraine makes you late? And listen, if you've got some kind of special condition like early morning onset migraines, and that's the diagnosis, then I get it. That makes sense. But if you don't, and it's regular migraines that could happen any time of the day, and you just want to be late sometimes, that's a pretty crappy case, right? And I share that because we need to know why the 2 hours, the flexible scheduling actually helps you with your condition, right? And sometimes you can just get a doctor to write whatever on an accommodation letter. But it doesn't mean someone's not going to question it. There's going to be an opposing medical expert who's going to say something like, listen, what's described here, being late 2 hours doesn't make a difference. It's not going to help. It's not a reasonable ask. It's not reasonable because it doesn't fix the problem. It's not reasonable because the employer can't do it, right? Medical expert's not going to say the employer can't do it, but you get what I'm saying. Like, that's the argument. Like, hey, this doesn't actually help you. And it really puts the difficulty into our scheduling. So we're not going to do it. We don't think it's reasonable. We don't actually think it helps you. We're happy to engage in a reasonable accommodation dialogue because you do have a legitimate disability. We just think this is not a good accommodation for you, and we don't think it's reasonably something you can ask of us. In October 3rd, I have no idea. I'm not saying you're engaged in any of this, but I'm saying this might be what attorneys are thinking when you come in. I'm sure your case is very legitimate and meritorious. But when you're talking about, like, I need flexible scheduling because of my sleep disorder, you're the 40th person that year to come in probably to that employment office and be like, yeah, I need to show up late sometimes, which also I know not what you're saying. You're saying flexible scheduling, which is different, but the employment attorneys here, another person who just wants to be late sometimes, and they're not listening to you the way they should be listening to you, and that is what's creating difficulties in you obtaining the representation you want. So no, the employer is not freed from their obligation. You have a disability. They must engage in the reasonable accommodation dialogue, and they must grant you reasonable accommodations. But those reasonable accommodations do need to be related to your disability, right? They need to be something that can actually help you. And part of the hurdle you're getting over is, it can be hard to give voice, and I'm sure you could, but it can be difficult to give voice to how flexible scheduling helps somebody suffering from certain sleep disorders. Probably not yours. I'm sure flexible scheduling is exactly what your disability needs. None of this applies to you, but you're suffering from other people who have been up to no good, and employment attorneys have had it up to yeah with their bullshit, and they don't want to listen to you because they're grouping you in with those people. That, I think, is what you're facing. Yeah, I think that's what you're facing. I don't mean to be reductive about it, but I think you probably have a meritorious claim, and people are not hearing you out because they think you're just another person who wants to be late, which is some form of discrimination. We need to be better as employment attorneys, right? Anyways, octuple threat. I hope that helps. If it does, like, subscribe, comment down below. Share the channel so it can grow. Love your username. Certainly. And let me see if I can do a little bit more here, because I think I lost the thread on what the accommodation was. Or no, what the disability was. You just said sleep disorder generally. Yeah, so listen, there's a whole gamut of sleep disorders, right? There's sleep disorders I have worked on where the person specifically had, in certain situations, a very difficult time waking up. I don't think it's narcolepsy. I forget what it was called, but it was a medical condition where the person would occasionally, on rare instances, find it very, very difficult to wake up, right? That is a flexible scheduling disability. Very clearly, that person needs to be allowed to be tardy at some times, right? Like, so please don't think that I'm dismissing all sleep disorders as disabilities. I am not. I'm just saying that you are not being properly listened to because some bad actors have tried to use nonsense to get things in the workplace. And so I think employment attorneys are not giving you a fair shake. That's what I suspect is going on. Anyways, like, subscribe, comment down below. Share the channel so it can grow. Take care. Good luck to you, octuple threat.